The Boston Teachers Union has been trying to rally more public support for settling a new contract with the city. As with past contracts, both parties try to combine dollar amounts with an agenda for learning. These are also in the mix for the Boston Municipal Research Bureau. With some thoughts about what the contract should include is the Bureau's president, Sam Tyler. Thank you very much for being with us again, Sam.
Thanks, Chris.
I know that certainly you want to see more reforms in this contract, starting with, I guess, extended learning. What should be in this contract to make sure that we have more of that available to kids in Boston?
Well, I think the budget that the superintendent and the school committee have approved does provide for 39 more schools to have extended learning time. That's on top of the original 18, but it's at the same negotiated price. Our recommendation was that extend learning time to schools, but at a lower price so that it's more sustainable. So as a result, you know, the dollars that are required for the extended time make up maybe about 45% of the total new dollars to the schools. So less money for other programs. So, but extended time is important. So other issues, we're looking at issues that improve the quality of teachers. So, you know, the early hiring, mutual consent, we want to really solidify that. Better evaluation of teachers so that you can work with teachers, help them, but also identify teachers that shouldn't be teaching anymore. The whole issue of teachers that were not selected by schools that have to be placed in suitable professional capacity, so they're called SPC teachers. There's need to work to provide them the support to see if they can put themselves in a situation and learn more about how to apply what's expected so that they can be selected by a school. But if they're not, then after a year of not being selected by a school, or if they don't even apply for school positions, teaching positions, you know, that the school system be able to, you know, dismiss them. You know, we're being more careful about, well, the school department's being more careful about hiring quality teachers, where schools get to decide, you know, the teachers are going to be in their school. And so seniority doesn't really play a role. But if we're in a situation where teachers are going to be dismissed because there isn't sufficient funds or spaces, that's still by seniority, and that should change. So otherwise, you know, the good teachers that are being hired will be the first to leave. So that needs to be adjusted. You know, our concern is that that we need to improve student achievement, and that ought to be the first priority of a contract, and that the teacher's contract is really the only vehicle other than state law, but we're not seeing really much interest in part of the legislature to go beyond what they've approved so far. So the teacher's contract really is the only vehicle for real reform. And you know, there are too many students in level 3, level 4, level 5, non-performing schools, and they can't wait for a couple years to try to come back and get it right. I mean, they need the change now. There are 45 level 3 schools. This is the lowest student achievement, or the lowest 20% of student achievement statewide. And there's those 45 schools have about, it's about 21,000 students. There's where there's an urgency for change and reform, and that's why, you know, we're suggesting that, you know, to the city, don't settle the contract unless it has bold reform. You know, the teachers union and the city have been in negotiations for 15 months. There looks like key issues that still are not resolved. You know, and so we want to keep at least that pressure up to say, if you're going to pay more, you ought to get something really substantive in return. Now, the other issue that's tied into this is the fact that the patrolmen have negotiated a contract with the city for 2% a year for 4 years, and really minimal reform. So I don't know that the city's prepared to offer the teachers more than 2% a year, but they really do need to achieve reform. Otherwise, we're dealing with another contract that has incremental change and it doesn't serve the students.
This is BNN News. We're talking with Sam Tyler from the Boston Municipal Research Bureau. From the teachers union, we're hearing that they want things like maybe a guaranteed minimum of 2 teachers in inclusive classrooms, and they want more of the teachers in autonomy schools to get all their time, maybe not all their time, but at least to limit the time when they're not compensated. It sounds like their message is that there needs to be more resources in the schools.
Well, to comply with what they're looking for, yes, because all those items you mentioned, plus salary increases, would be adding to the overall cost of the department. It's hard to argue that the school department's not getting a fair share. I mean, it's a billion. In the end, it's going to be $1,081 million budget. I mean, 20 million of that is set aside for collective bargaining, but over the last 5 years, school spending has increased by 25%, and that's taking out health insurance because no other department has health insurance in their budget. During that same 5 years, police and fire combined, their spending has increased 22%. All other city departments have increased by 16%. So irrespective of the fact that the charter tuition assessment, which is the money that is going to the charter schools and therefore an assessment against the city, their city's losing those dollars. That's not affected the school budget at all, but the city is absorbing that. So there's with a city that, in every city in town, where most of their revenue is based on the property tax, state aid really hasn't kept pace with city spending. At that same 5-year period where school spending has increased 25%, Chapter 70 education aid has increased by 5.2%, so not even close.
Well, there could be some changes with federal funding from the Trump administration. Part of their sketchy plan is to have more money, more education money for vouchers, and maybe to take the Title I money for areas of concentrated poverty and let that go wherever the students choose to attend school. What do you see the effect on Boston from this?
I think it would have a big effect. I mean, we're already seeing a reduction in federal funds for programs that are serving high-need students. Whether it's be from poverty areas or special education needs, and the school department has had to absorb those costs. That's one of the reasons for the 25% increase. We're already dealing with a substantial amount of state funds going to the charter schools and not to the school department, and the state not reimbursing for what they should be in terms of the tuition. Adding on to that, losing funds because of vouchers or other changes that might take place in the federal budget would make it a lot more difficult. I mean, the city is not going to be able to make up that difference.
Another area you've been keeping your eye on are the planned cuts in the National Institutes of Health. That's money that comes to a lot of the teaching hospitals here for medical research, scientific research. It looks like a lot of money we're going to be missing, if that actually took place.
Well, yeah, and that's a big if right now. But, I mean, Boston now for 22 consecutive years has been the #1 city in terms of the largest amount of NIH funding for science, medical research. And that makes a huge difference in this city. That's one of the drivers of the city's economy. So, I mean, the president's, as we call it, skinny budget has proposed, I guess, a $5.8 billion reduction in NIH funding. It's the Congress that's really going to make that decision. And Congress has been generally supportive of NIH funding, knowing that scientific research and breakthroughs is part of what's going to grow the state, the national economy and keep the country competitive. So I don't think in the short term we're going to see a lot of change. But if the president continues this thrust, then over time it probably will, and that will have again an impact not only on the city's economy, but the country's ability to be competitive in terms of research.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Sam Tyler.